Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am your host today. My name is Greg Huss, and this is episode number 105, I believe. Today, I am your only host, as you've had the past few weeks or so. I guess that's not entirely true, right? I went solo a few weeks ago, and then Brian and I were working together on an episode, and then this past week was kind of a special episode focused on the draft with Greg Zumak. And then today, once again, you're getting just me solo today. So I'm pre-recording this episode. So a lot of these questions you'll see are questions that are not specific to the podcast, not or to the system as of right this very second. As you guys have probably heard me mention the past few weeks or so, was on Baby Watch, and so this is kind of a pre-recorded episode with Baby on the way right now. So I really appreciate your guys' support over the past several weeks, but also over the course of the past 104 episodes that we've done of the show. I know that last week I'm recording this actually today on June 1st in preparation to release this. But yeah, man, it's one of those things where we actually surpassed 1,000 subscribers over on the Cubs on Deck YouTube channel, which we appreciate so much your support there. That our Jonny Long episode with me and Brian ended up doing pretty good numbers, but really you're supporting on podcast platforms as well, and really have just supported us every single day, every single episode throughout the entire 105 episodes of this show. So thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said, today we're going to be a little bit quicker in terms of this episode. We're not going to go an hour long, I'd imagine, probably closer to 45 minutes. We'll see how much I ramble, how much you guys want to listen to me ramble for about 45 minutes or so to answer some of these questions. But thank you so much for sending questions my way. I know I got several questions over on Twitter, a couple on Blue Sky, and then several on the 1060 West Discord channel as well. So thank you for sending those in. Your questions are what is going to lead this episode. So without further ado, let's go ahead and lead off this show with a question about, I guess, who else? Who else would we lead off with other than Jonny Long? So Bill Rofer asked, how does Jonny Long stack up against the rest of the 2023 draft that the Cubs put together? So this is actually really fun. So I've got the draft class pulled up right now. And that, of course, the 2023 draft class, Jonny Long went ninth in the ninth round. That's the same draft class as Matt Shaw and Jackson Wiggins up top. And I would say that outside of Matt Shaw and Jackson Wiggins, Jonathan Long is the guy right now from that class. But it's really an interesting class of draft picks. So honestly, I'll just run down this group. We know Matt Shaw. We know he's up in Chicago, performing way better than he was to begin the year. He's showing out. He's looked terrific on defense. Was watching him in this afternoon's game and made a couple incredible defensive plays over at third base. And I guess real quick tangent on Matt Shaw's defense. I know that's a major league thing. He's still technically a prospect, so I can talk about him on the show. But the defense we're seeing from Matt Shaw is not something that he did last year. Specifically, his arm. His arm has been really, really impressive. The defense in general has been good, but he did not have this arm. I know that. Man, who was it? It was me. It might have been all four of us. It might have been me, Brian, Zumak, and then I think Brennan Miller came on as well this past offseason. And we talked about Matt Shaw's defense. And we talked about how going to his backhand at third base down the line really was not his strong suit. And now he does have the arm to do that. He does have the arm to play third base in the major leagues. And that's not something where like we necessarily miscalculated how strong his arm was during his time in the minor leagues and during his time in college. It was more of a situation where I'd imagine he put in a significant amount of work this past offseason in between 2024 and 2025 to get better defensively, both with his arm and his glove at third base. And it's really proving that he is that guy at third base for the Chicago Cubs. So that's super fun. So obviously Matt Straw, the first round draft pick. Jackson Wiggins was the Cubs' second pick of the draft. And that was a draft pick that the Cubs actually got because they lost Wilson Contreras over that offseason. And so getting Jackson Wiggins in the system, and he's really showed out so far this year. A real true breakout in the system as far as a pitcher goes is Jackson Wiggins. He's looked good during his time in Double A, just like he looked good during his time in High A. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him up in AAA this season as well. So those are two guys. The top two draft picks have been the top two guys in the system. I think both those guys, as of this very second, Matt Shaw still has not graduated, are top 6 prospects maybe in the Cubs farm system. Shaw obviously number 1, and then Jaxon Wiggins maybe. I think Brian Smith had him 4th or 5th overall in the system. Definitely a top 10 prospect in the organization. Probably top 8, maybe top 6 is what I'd say for Jaxon Wiggins. After that, the Cubs drafted Josh Rivera, who was used in a trade package last year for Nate Pearson. He was sent over to the Blue Jays with Yohendrick Pinango for Nate Pearson. So went out to use a draft pick to go out and get major league help. Obviously, that hasn't really worked out with Nate Pearson, but the how that was handled still remains. Will Sanders is, if not for Jaxon Wiggins, we'd be talking more about Will Sanders. He made his AAA debut this week and looked strong, even though he gave up a few runs. So really strong performance from Will Sanders since he was drafted. Michael Carrico was a 5th round draft pick, and I don't know, Carrico just has not been healthy. He's not been healthy over the course of his career. Has been promising when he's been healthy, but it just hardly healthy at any point. He's currently on the injured list right now. Alfonso Rosario was a 6th round draft pick, also used as trade as a trade package to go get major league talent. He was traded this past offseason to go get Eli Morgan from Cleveland. Yadiel Melendez is now making his debut in full season ball at Myrtle Beach. Brett Bateman is a guy that I know a lot of people like. He's up in AA. And then Jonny Long is that 9th round pick. After that, some other notable players. There's still guys in the system, but there's also Zaire Hope was one of the main pieces in that package to go get Michael Busch from the Dodgers. Obviously, he was an 11th round draft pick. We've seen Luis Martinez Gomez. We've seen Carter Trice playing center field for the South Bend Cubs, which is kind of crazy. Sam Armstrong was a part of that draft. Grayson Moore has gotten some playing time in South Bend out of the bullpen this year. Ty Johnson was also used as a trade piece to go get. He was part of that Isaac Paredes trade. So he was part of the Kyle Tucker trade tree, I guess. He was included alongside Hunter Biggie and Christopher Morel in that trade. Daniel Brown was a draft pick out of Campbell, left-handed pitcher that has been released since being drafted. Who else is here? Ethan Flanagan still hasn't made his full season debut. Brian Calmer was hot that year he got drafted and hasn't done much since. Nick Dean was a 19th round pick, and I think I might talk a little bit more about Nick Dean later in this episode. And then Drew Bowser, who's spending his time in South Bend this season, actually been pretty hot over the past few weeks or so. So I don't know. I guess the question is, how does he stack up against the rest of the draft? I'd put Jonny Long, the 9th round pick, as probably the 3rd best prospect out of that draft right now in the Cubs system, behind Matt Shaw and Jaxon Wiggins. If I was also ranking other guys that are outside of the system, Alfonso Rosario and Zaire Hope would probably be above him. So for him to go from a 9th round draft pick to the 5th best prospect out of that draft class is pretty impressive. And I bet some people would argue that they would have him above Alfonso Rosario. Some people might argue that he's above Jaxon Wiggins. I wouldn't make that case, but Jonathan Long, really strong performance all the way up in AAA Iowa at 23 years old, just a couple seasons removed from being drafted out of Long Beach State. So yeah, that's how I have him kind of stacking up against the rest of that draft class. All right, next question is from Todd Johnson and Connor Bowles, who both asked me to rank my top pitching prospects in the system post Cade graduation. I think Todd asked me to go 10 names deep. Connor asked me to go 5 names deep. And so, yeah, assuming that Cade Horton eventually does graduate from prospect status here soon, in my opinion, the number 1 pitching prospect in the organization very clearly becomes Jaxon Wiggins. He is the guy. After that, we talked about him plenty. He's your next best pitching prospect in this organization. After that, I think it's a combination. I think you have. Sorry, I'm looking off screen here. If you guys are watching on YouTube, I've got my notes of the makings of a prospect list here. We can maybe clip that and throw some a graphic on top of that, but I've got the makings of a prospect list. And I think that after Jaxon Wiggins, in terms of pitching prospects go, it's probably either Will Sanders or Brandon Birdsell. Obviously, Brandon Birdsell was the Cubs minor league pitcher of the year last year, and he's still working his way back from injury. Honestly, by the time that you guys are listening to this episode, he very well may be making rehab starts in South Bend, maybe. He's on his way back to the rotation in AAA Iowa. I think that because he hasn't pitched this year, we're forgetting how good he was last year, but also can't discount the fact that Will Sanders has been terrific this season. He's showed out right now on how good he can be. So I'd probably go Jaxon Wiggins 1. I'll go I'll go Brandon Birdsell 2 and then Will Sanders 3 in terms of my top 3 pitching prospects in the organization right now. And then after that, it becomes crazy. We've seen an incredible breakout over the past month or so. I'd say last 5 starts from Ryan Gallagher. Again, by the time you're listening to this, Ryan Gallagher might be already promoted up to Double A tennis, up to Double A Knoxville. That's a very real possibility. So he's in that mix after the big 3 of Wiggins, Birdsell, Sanders. I think that Gallagher's there. Arian Rodriguez is back to pitching. He's in that mix. Connor Noland is absolutely still in that mix. If you're major league rotation depth, you need to get a mention here in the 4th, 5th, 6th area of best pitching prospects in the organization. Besides that, Brody McCullough is still out with injury, and so I had him preseason up pretty high. He's probably dropped down a little bit up to this point. Drew Gray is also throwing down in Mesa right now, so we might see a return from him sometime soon if he comes out and performs really, really well. I think that he enters into this mix yet again. Nick Dean was the other guy that I wanted to call out here as being in that top six-ish pitching prospects in the organization. He had a really strong outing to start off his Double A season this year in 2025. The dude is outrageously good at getting swings and misses, and that is one of the top things you should look at when grading and critiquing pitching prospects is do they get swings and misses with multiple pitches? And Nick Dean does that. A lot of it's with a changeup that's really good, but he does that with the slider and the fastball as well. This test in Double A and in Triple A once he gets there is going to be huge for Nick Dean. JP Wheat is a name that I really want to throw in this mix. He's been really impressive this season. The results overall haven't really been as good as what the eye test has shown me, but he deserves to be in this mix a little bit as well. Nazir Muley has been on the injured list for a little bit now, but I think that I heard rumblings that he may return from the injured list here sometime soon. And then throw Grant Kipp into Grant Kipp and Nick Hull for that matter, always in the back end of my thinking. And so prospects 4 through 10, I think from those names that I just mentioned, go for it. Like make your list. I don't know how to rank those dudes. I know I will throw together a prospect ranking likely midseason, probably. When I typically do that, I think that prior to the trade deadline, but after the draft, I think, or maybe right before the draft. I'll see when I do it this year. In July is when I'll release a new prospect ranking. I'll have it figured out at least a little bit by the time that rolls around. But I'd say, yeah, again, the big 3 of Wiggins, Birdsell, and Sanders are my guys, and then a huge mix of dudes: Rodriguez, Noland, Drew Gray, Nick Dean, JP Wheats, Naz Muley. That's your mix of guys ranked after those 3. I'll throw. I always like to throw one reliever in that mix. And I'll probably go Riley Martin, given how strong he's been. I think he's the best relief prospect in the organization right now. Jack Neely has been. He's had a rough year so far in 2025. Jack Neely has so impressive last year in 2024, but just not finding the zone this so far this season. And when he does find the zone, he's being hit really hard a lot. And so I think that catapults Riley Martin up to the best relief pitcher in the Cubs farm system so far this year. So I'd put him in the back end of all those names that I just mentioned as just kind of an honorable mention to the mix here. All right, we have a question from Caldy asking, who are your top 3 most tradable prospects? So we actually have 2 questions here. The first from Caldy, and the next one will be from Eric, asking about tradable prospects in this Cubs farm system. And yeah, I think that I've mentioned them quite a bit on the show already. I think that the 2 names that stand out the absolute most to me are Jonathan Long and Christian Hernandez. I think neither of those dudes are headliners in a prospect trade package. And actually, hold on, let me go ahead and throw on this next question and mention this next question from Eric. He asked one under the radar prospect that's a trade candidate, a la Alfonso Rosario last winter. And so actually, I'll start off with this and say Christian Hernandez and Jonathan Long for the under the radar type prospect. I think those are both guys that are ranked outside of the top 8 prospects in the organization. They match up well with what we saw from Alfonso Rosario, where I had Rosario right around, I think I had Rosario ranked as the 10th best prospect in the organization this last offseason before he was traded away. And so Long and Hernandez fit that mold. Right, I think that they're not headliners in a package for a top of the rotation starter, but Christian Hernandez has the pedigree. He was a top international free agent signing. He has been strong as of late, still young. He's a guy that's going to need to be protected from the Rule 5 draft this upcoming offseason, so that might make him a little bit more tradable from the Cubs' perspective. And Jonathan Long it's a strike while the iron's hot type of deal for the Cubs. If you have a really strong performance from a guy like Jonathan Long, who plays a lot of first base, maybe can play some third base, left field. I would imagine the Cubs will be testing him out there to prove that he can play there for trade packages here in July, in late June, early July. But I think those are your kind of under the radar type trade candidates. But again, I don't think that either of those guys are headliners for the top of the rotation starter. They will need to be included as a part of a trade package alongside the top 100 type guys that the Cubs have in the farm system. That includes James Triantos, Owen Casey, Kevin Alcantara. Those are 3 names. I expect 1, if not 2 of those players to be traded this trade deadline. Right now, James Triantos just went on the injured list again. I don't know if he was officially on the injured list earlier this year or not, but this is the second time this season that he's going to end up missing time due to injury, and that doesn't help with the trade, including him in a trade package. That doesn't increase his trade value at all. That's kind of rough to see. Kevin Alcantara is coming into his own a little bit, like he always does. Always gets off to a rough start, but he may be blazing hot by the time the trade deadline rolls around. Owen Casey, we know we've talked so much about Owen Casey and how he might fit into a trade package. I think that ultimately for a top of the rotation starter, you see 1 or 2 of those 3 guys, Triantos, Casey, and Alcantara, and then you see 1 or 2 of those under the radar, quote unquote, type guys, Jonathan Long and Christian Hernandez included in a trade package. I just don't see a scenario where Moises Ballesteros is included in a trade package. I would be shocked if Jackson Wiggins, their new number 1 pitching prospect in the organization, I'd be shocked if he's included. I think it comes down to those 5 names I mentioned. If you're looking for a deep cut, like under the radar type guy, I think you're probably looking at that Myrtle Beach roster and saying there's a lot of tools on that Myrtle Beach lineup, not a whole lot of production up to this point. If you want to go the route of Jose Escobar or Yajil Melendez or I don't know, man, any of those younger type of players down in the lower levels of the system. I think even Cole Mathis, maybe, like he doesn't really fit. He's an older guy, a college draftee last year, obviously, but Myrtle Beach is the roster to look for guys that potentially have some higher upside that other teams might target from the Cubs perspective. That's the big thing for me is when you're talking tradable prospects, if you're talking, oh, who might the Cubs trade from a prospect perspective, it's not 9 times out of 10, it's not the Cubs saying, hey, I'd be okay trading this prospect. It's the other way around, where another team is identifying a prospect based on their scouting, based on their models, and they say, oh, the Cubs have this prospect I want to target in a trade. Let me ask for him. And so I think that that's the way I'm looking at it. And that's why I identify Christian Hernandez or Jonathan Long as someone another team might find attractive in a trade package, not a player that the Cubs would be willing to give up. The Cubs would be willing. This kind of links back into the conversation about untouchable prospects in trade packages. Like there aren't any untouchable prospects. That does not exist. Because for any type of major league talent, depending on the talent level, the Cubs would be willing to give up any prospect in order to get that, right? That's why the Paul Skeens trade mock trades are so hilarious and ridiculous and absurd. Like they will never trade Paul Skeens, but no prospect the Cubs have is off limits when you're talking about trading for Paul Skeens. That's like the ultimate example of this. But yeah, man, I think that you got to look at it from the perspective of other teams and who they would want to target. All right, we have a question about Jefferson Rojas. Cubs account asks if Jefferson Rojas maintains his current production between high A and double A, and he sticks at shortstop, how high will he rank as a prospect? Well, this year has been really impressive from Jefferson Rojas. He's been one of the most impressive offensive talents in the organization so far this year. Again, if Jonathan Long was not a thing, if Moises Ballesteros was not a thing this year, we'd be talking a lot more about Jefferson Rojas. And I think that this has been exactly the breakout, not breakout, that's not the right term. It's been exactly the bounce back from Jefferson Rojas that we had hoped after in 2023 was very impressive. A lot to be excited about from Jefferson Rojas during his time in Myrtle Beach. Last year in South Bend, the numbers weren't nearly as good, but a lot of the under the hood numbers were very impressive in terms of how hard he was hitting the ball, how little he was swinging and missing. There's a lot to like, but the numbers just weren't quite there in terms of overall production. And part of that might have been due to a little bit of not injuries, but just he was a little beat up throughout the year, obviously last year. And so the fact that he's bounced back even better than that 2023 version of himself, he's a top 50 prospect in all of baseball. If he can be promoted up, be 20 years old in AA Knoxville, putting together a batting average of 300, hovering right around 300, WRC plus of 130 plus. Like, I think that if you're talking about a plus offensive performer who also sticks at shortstop, who's also 20 years old, and who's also in the upper levels of the minors, like that's a top 50 prospect in all of baseball. And I think that all those national publications, Pipeline and Just Baseball and Baseball America and Prospectus and all those places love to identify a guy like Jefferson Rojas as a guy to shoot up prospect lists. Like, he will be a top 50 prospect in all of baseball if he does those things, as opposed to like Jonathan Long is a good example, right? Like, Jonathan Long is absolutely tearing it up in every single way up in AAA, but he's not going to be a top 50 prospect in all of baseball. Baseball America isn't going to identify him and be like, oh, like we would love to rank him top 50. No, that's not the case for him. Jefferson Rojas, a young shortstop, is a guy they would love to showcase on their top 50. If it stays at this level of production up in Double A that he's shown in High A, yeah, that's not only top 50. I mean, you're probably pushing top 30, top 20 type prospect in all of baseball. So super exciting year from Jefferson Rojas so far, and I'm excited to see when he does ultimately get promoted up to Double A. All right, Kurt asked, which lower level prospect are you most excited about and think has the best chance to break out? This is actually a really, really good question from Kurt. I like this one a lot, especially given the timing of the question. I know that we kind of addressed this a little bit early on in the season, and we said there's a whole bunch of dudes in Myrtle Beach that are young and not quite like top 10 prospects, but have potential to break out. And some of that shine is worn off a little bit as they just really have not performed very well in the early going down in Myrtle Beach. And so the timing of this question is actually terrific. The one name I'm going to point out first is someone who's actually not in Myrtle Beach yet, as of this recording on June 1st. It's Eli Lovich. Eli Lovich has been really impressive down in Mesa so far. I think that I've heard nothing but good things about him as a player, as a person, as a worker during his time down in Mesa. I think that we could see him, if not already now, we could see him very soon in Myrtle Beach. And he's kind of a breakout waiting to happen. I would love to see him come up to Myrtle Beach, perform well offensively. And we're not talking like putting up a 300, 400, 500 slash line. That's not what I'm expecting from him. But like for a teenager, for a 19-year-old who has power potential and speed potential to come and put up like decent numbers when he is younger than league average in Myrtle Beach is all I'm asking for. And that's all I'm asking in order to place him in my top 20 prospects in the Cubs system easily. So Eli Lovich is the number one name I'll point out for sure. I'm keeping a close eye on Angel Cepeda. I know that the numbers haven't been super strong so far in the early going. He so far this season is bashing still above 100, above average in terms of that bash metric, and part of that is because it's hard to hit in Myrtle Beach. He's young, but there's still a lot to like about Angel Cepeda. So keep an eye out for him. He's my other kind of breakout guy. I guess Justin Florentino is another name if we're going pitching prospects. He has been wildly impressive during his time down in Mesa. We could see him also up in Myrtle Beach at some point. So two names that Justin Florentino and Eli Lovich, two names that are not currently in Myrtle Beach. So I guess if we're talking about breakout guys and the guys that we talked about early in the season didn't really live up to expectations, we move on to the next group of guys. But I'm not ruling out like a poor start from Ariandes Ramon or Jose Escobar. Like that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not prospects to watch anymore. I think that a second half of the season is going to be really important for those two guys specifically. All right, we have a question from Bridger asking, does Casey Opitz ever see Chicago? And the reason why I included this is it's when Casey Opitz was drafted back in 2021, was Casey Opitz draft class? Yeah. Casey Opitz was an 8th round draft pick in 2021 and out of Arkansas. And when he was drafted, a lot of the conversations around Casey Opitz was the defense is so good, the game managing is so good, he works with the pitching staff so well that all he really needs to do is hit league average in order to make the major leagues. And um, I can still say the exact same thing sitting here today as I did on draft day. The problem is, back on draft day, I had higher expectations that he could potentially hit at a league average rate throughout the minor leagues. This season, and so far his entire minor league career, he has not been close to minor league average at the plate. He's been one of the worst offensive performers in the Cubs system the past few years. And so at that point, he's not catching every day. He's a real timeshare situation and he's a situation where a lot of the Cubs catchers in the minor leagues are exactly like Casey Opitz. We saw, we've seen David Abitia, we've seen Pablo Aliendo to a certain degree. A lot of Cubs catchers are game managers, are good at working with pitching staffs, and so yeah, man, if Casey Opitz, I don't even think he needs to be an average bat in the minor leagues to get some playing time in the major leagues. But um, if he is below average, if he's like a 85 WRC plus, 90 WRC plus type of guy in Double A and Triple A, then yeah, then maybe he does get a call up at some point if there's a need for a third catcher or at the end of the year or um, just a guy that fills in for 2 weeks to manage a pitching staff that the pitching staff trusts, and then he gets outrighted off the 40-man roster. I think he's a really good example of something like that happening, but he can't be one of the worst offensive performers in the system in order to make it up to the majors. And I think that what he does in the minor leagues is super, super, super valuable to the pitchers in this organization, and we can't discount that. I think that a lot of times when we talk about prospects, it's like, oh, like, can they impact Chicago? Can they impact the major leagues? Well, he's impacting the major leagues in different ways, in the way that he works with pitching with pitchers, and the way he can work with other catchers in the organization as well. I know that he overlapped a little bit with Moises Ballesteros as well, and so I'm sure he wore off on Mo as well. So he's impacting the organization in other ways than the major league level. All right. So next question is from Thad Warnell asking, what is a behind the scenes development change that the Cubs have made in, say, the last 5 years that you think has made a significant impact that doesn't get enough attention? Yeah, so I got two things that come to mind in terms of behind the scenes organization wide development and drafting changes. The first of which is talked about more, I guess, is less under the radar, but the Cubs' willingness to continue to adapt their pitching philosophies over the past 5 years has been critical to the development of these new pitchers. So we talk about the organization as a whole, whether it's pitch labbing a major league veteran and making them a bullpen piece for Chicago, or drafting a guy deep down in the draft and turning them into major league depth in the minor leagues in terms of the rotation, or taking Jackson Wiggins, who did not perform in college at all, and then drafting him as a second round draft pick and getting him into the top pitching prospect in the organization. That's huge. Or Cade Horton being another guy that was a lot of question marks when he was drafted, and turning him into a top 40 prospect in baseball and the Cubs' best pitching prospect since Mark Pryor. That's no joke. And I think part of that is not only because they're good at developing pitchers now. It's not that easy. It's the fact that they've been willing to change and they've continued to alter their methods over the past 5+ years to get to this point. I think that's huge. And as much as it's talked about, I don't think it gets talked about nearly enough. The other thing I'll identify is the Cubs' willingness to draft hitters that profile as first baseman, maybe with something else defensively, right? Drafting or signing, getting a guy like Moises Ballesteros, a guy like Jonny Long we've talked about today, or even other dudes like Matt Mervis, who was a undrafted free agent signee after the 2020 draft, going out and getting drafting Hayden McGeary, who just killed the ball during his time in college and killed it for 1 year in the Cubs system and has dropped off since. I mentioned briefly Brian Calmer earlier, right? He was a guy that was a first base only prospect and was good that first year and then dropped off after the fact. It's less to me about this conversation that I'm having right now is less about guys that have continued to perform and work their way up prospect lists and impact Chicago. We have seen that with Moises Ballesteros. We have seen that with Jonathan Long. We have seen that with Matt Mervis, not so much with McGeary and Brian Calmer. I'm sure I'm missing some dudes here, but my point is prior to the 2020 draft or so, right around that time period, the Cubs didn't ever have these guys in the system. First base was a position that they used for a third catcher on a roster in the minor leagues or an infielder. Liam Spence comes to mind, a guy that's a utility infielder. They threw at first base a lot. They threw journeyman minor league prospects at first base a lot from the catcher position. They just used first base for pretty much the entire 2010s as just kind of a spillover position. And I understood what they were kind of thinking to a certain degree is that a lot of first base prospects in college, sorry, that's not the right way to describe it. A lot of third base prospects in college end up working their way over to first base when they can't play defense at third base. Just like you see shortstops move to second base or shortstops move to third base or second baseman move to the outfield or third baseman move to a corner outfield or whatever it might be. You kind of always go down a peg in terms of defensive value from college to the pros. And so the Cubs just really didn't use first base as a position to draft and develop mashers during in the minor leagues. And so the fact that they've identified that as a way to produce talent is unique to the way the system has operated in the past. And I really liked it. I think that just because Jonny Long might not impact your Chicago team doesn't mean that he doesn't have offensive value and you can't use him as a part of the trade package. Matt Mervis was absolutely worth the non-drafted free agent signing and worth watching kill the ball up to the minor leagues and then ultimately work up into the major leagues. And so, that's been different. And it's a good thing. I don't think it's a wildly impressive thing or great thing that they've done. It's just different. It's something that they've clearly made a change in over the past 5 years or so. The last tiny thing I'll throw in to comment on Thad Warnell's question here is the pitching strategies in terms of pitch counts, right? Over the past 5 years, the Cubs did not have pitchers that went deep in starts. They did not allow their pitchers to throw 80 plus pitches, 90 plus pitches. They never touched 100. They never went 3 times through the order. That was not a thing. I mentioned in a tweet recently, in a post on Blue Sky recently, that we saw Tyler Schlafer had one of the best performances that we've seen in the Cubs farm system in quite some time on the mound. And in that start, he faced 28 batters on the mound. He ended up going 8 innings, 1 hit, no runs. I think it was 8 strikeouts, no walks. And he faced 28 batters. And prior to that, the only other instance of a guy facing 28 batters in a start over the past 3 years, so 2025, 2024, and 2023, was one start from Connor Noland in July of 2023. And in that start, Connor Noland actually gave up 5 runs. It's just not something the Cubs have allowed their starting pitchers to do. This year, that's being changed. I know that Todd Johnson posted something really good on social media of a list of all the guys and how many times that they've thrown 80 plus pitches and 90 plus pitches in the system this year. And those numbers are just way, way, way up compared to last year and the year prior and the year prior and the year prior. And so that's been a very concerted effort by the Cubs, is to have their pitchers go deeper in starts. And I think that is that's something I've been shouting for a while. I think that's something that's really important to Cubs minor league pitching development. So I'll throw that into this mix as well. Even though it's not a 5-year thing, it's more of a this year type of thing. All right, we're going to end with two questions from Stan, who asked on the Discord a while back, and can't thank you enough for throwing these into the mix, because these are a couple really good questions, probably deeper questions than what I'm going to give them the attention. These deserve like full episode long questions. Specifically, this one here. Stan ask about the impact of the lack of short season ball on guys like Adon Sanchez or Ty Southasine or Chris Passiola. Basically, short season ball was removed, we're at 4 years ago now at this point. Going into the 2021 season, short season ball out in Eugene, the Eugene Emeralds, that affiliate was removed from all of minor league baseball, not just the Cubs, but all of minor league baseball. And at this point, we're starting to see some trends. I think we realized right away some of the impacts of losing that short season ball did. But I think it just kind of compounded over the past few years. And at this point, it's very clear that like the number one impact in my eyes in terms of player development on guys like Adon Sanchez and Ty Southasine, Chris Passiola, there's a whole list of dudes, is that players are ready to move out of the complex in Arizona, but they are not quite ready developmentally to be playing full season ball in Myrtle Beach yet. And um, the struggle with that is that the reason short season ball was so successful for those type of players was that it was exactly that. It was short season ball. It was a short time period. Guys could go from extended spring training. They could go from the complex. After the draft, the season would start up in Eugene, and they'd be up there from what was it, July, late July, I think is when it started, to August and September. And so it's something that these players could bite off a little bit more. Like they weren't biting off too much than they can chew. And being able to have that short season and travel for 8 weeks as opposed to travel for 4 months is a big, big difference. And so it was kind of their first taste into full season ball. It was their first taste into being a true minor league player, as opposed to just some prospect that's on the farm in the complex league where they're monitored by coaching staffs all the time. They are living and working all within a 100-mile radius in terms of going to the other spring training sites. And so it was right. It was just a nice taste of what minor league ball is actually like. And with that being gone, I think that the stuff off the field has been it's so much more difficult for them to take in. And I'm not saying Adon or Ty or Chris is specifically struggling off the field. That's not at all what I'm saying here. I'm just saying for a young 18 or 19-year-old to go up to a full season affiliate and travel all across the Eastern United States is a big ask for these guys, whether it's an international free agent signing or a high school draft pick. It's a tough ask of these guys. And so that's what I think has been impacted the most. And I think that actually these three names that Stan has thrown out specifically is a really good example where like Ty Southasine and Chris Passiola, both high school draft picks, both guys that had shown enough during their time in Mesa, in Arizona, but have been struggling during their time. Chris Passiola last year and this year, Ty Southasine in a small sample size so far in Myrtle Beach, have just struggled, that they're not quite ready for that level. And facing off against some pitchers that have been throwing games in the SEC years prior. Like there's a big difference between being a 19-year-old high school draft pick from last year and an SEC like 13th round draft pick that played at Alabama or Florida and faced off in SEC environments on a daily basis. Big difference in facing off against a guy like that. And so those guys were fine in Arizona and then and succeeded there, and then haven't quite found success, and they've felt overmatched. They've looked overmatched, and it's hard getting back into that groove of succeeding. Adon Sanchez is on the other side of the spectrum where like he hasn't really proven statistically that he's ready to move off of Mesa. But for your mental state, for you to continue to work in Mesa year after year after year, it's like we've seen guys. We saw that a lot with guys when there was the switch in the minor leagues from Myrtle Beach being the high A affiliate and South Bend being low A, to that switch to entering the 2021 one season is when that switched. And so with that, we saw guys like Cole Franklin and Cole Roeder were part of that group. I think Ed Howard was there a little bit as well. A few others where they ended up spending like 3 seasons down in South or up in South Bend because they spent their season there in low A and then high A and then high A again. Being at the same affiliate in the same location for multiple years in a row can really affect you mentally, I think, and really like get you to struggle. A change of scenery is huge. We talk about that with trades a lot, but I think it's also really important for minor league prospects as they continue to climb the ladder. So that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. So like I said, this is probably a topic that uh, would be really good to have like 60 minutes of like very scripted talking points as opposed to me quickly answering a stand question here. If somebody wants to do that, you can have this platform. You can hop on the podcast and record here and record for 60 minutes of a scripted walkthrough of the impact of the lack of short season ball. But that's kind of my thoughts right off the bat, and after looking at it for the past few years. Stan, for the last question here, Stan also asked, if this is a true sentence, what happened this year? Quote, the Cubs have a top 30 prospect in MLB who just so happens to be a pitcher. So basically what needs to happen for Cubs to have a top 30 prospect in Major League Baseball that is a pitcher? And I think that the emphasis on pitcher is really key. And to me, there's only one track for that to be the case. I probably should have answered this question earlier when I was talking about all the pitchers, but outside of the top 3, I think there's obviously no shot in anybody outside those top 3 guys, the Wiggins, Birdsell, and Sanders. There's no shot at any of those guys being a top 30 prospect in baseball because none of those other guys are even sniffing a top 100 prospect list as of right now. So let's change our attention to those top 3 pitching prospects. Well, I guess let's rule out the fact that Cade Horton graduates. If Cade Horton does not graduate, then I don't know why he wouldn't have graduated. Injury, limiting innings. I'm not sure why he wouldn't have graduated. But if he doesn't graduate from prospect status, then at that point, like maybe we're talking about Cade Horton as a top 30 prospect. But then you also throw in the mix, like why didn't he graduate? That may impact his prospect status. So we're going to move Cade Horton off to the side here as well. Brandon Birdsell, I just think that like his profile, even if he comes up and to AAA and he posts a sub 2 ERA the rest of the year, I just don't think that a 25-year-old pitcher at this point is going to be a top 30 prospect in baseball. I think he can be super valuable for Chicago this year even, and especially down the road, but he's just not going to reach top 30 prospects in all of baseball status. Will Sanders is probably the second most likely to reach this top 30 milestone in all of Major League Baseball by the end of the year. But I think that he has just an outrageously high uphill battle in order to get to that too. He would have to just tear it up the rest of the season in AAA. And even that, I think like he's not close to a top 100 prospect in baseball. So like chaos would have to ensue. So let's focus our attention on Jaxon Wiggins because he's the guy that I think is most likely of this bunch to ultimately be a top 30 prospect in baseball, maybe this season. I put the likelihood of that happening at like sub 5%. So it's all relative here, but I put it like sub 5%. What needs to happen for Jaxon Wiggins to be a top 30 prospect in all of baseball this year is he just needs to, I think he needs to debut in Chicago. I think he needs to do well enough on the bump in Knoxville and then get called up in the next month in July, probably, maybe August, up to AAA. That needs to happen. And then from there, he needs to log some sort of innings in Chicago. It doesn't need to be 20 innings. It can be 5 innings out of the bullpen, showing off great stuff. If he can do that, then I think there's a chance that he can be a top 50 prospect in baseball. If you find somebody like maybe R.M. Layton or someone at Baseball Prospectus that really, really digs the data that Jaxon Wiggins is showing in that wild promotion up to the bigs, that's how you're going to get a top 30 prospect in baseball, top 25 prospect in baseball. It needs to be a little bit of buy-in, like not unrealistic, a little bit of like extra buy-in from a specific evaluator, but also a crazy rise to the big leagues that's how Jaxon Wiggins becomes a top 30 prospect. All right, guys, that is all I've got today. That's all I've got for questions. We just hit the 45-minute mark. That's kind of what I was shooting for here today. Can't thank you enough for tuning in. Again, thank you for bearing with us on this wonky schedule, the wonky setup over the past. Again, I keep saying schedule. It's not really a schedule. The schedule is maintained pretty similar over the past few weeks, but the wonky setup with me going solo a couple times and then Zumac going solo once and doing a episode dedicated to the draft, like just a little out of the ordinary the past week. Can't thank you enough for standing by and keeping up with the show over these past few weeks. What's next for the show? We'll have to see. I expect to be back on the podcast airwaves a week from today, but I can't say that will for sure be the case. We'll see. We'll see what happens. My intention is for that to be taking place. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate your support. Check us out on YouTube. Give us a like on this video. We really appreciate your support there. Leave me a comment. Tell me where I'm wrong. I don't have Greg Zumac or Brian Smith or anybody else to check me on all these 45 minutes worth of takes that I've had. So you are responsible for checking me. You are responsible for saying, Greg, you're an absolute idiot. This is what you got wrong in this podcast. Leave me a comment down on YouTube below. Give us a rating on Apple, on Spotify, and all that good stuff. We really appreciate your support there as well. And with that, we'll talk to you in ideally one short week. Thanks, guys.